Hi, my name is Christina Gerhardt. I'm an associate professor at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, and I teach environmental humanities here. The paper I'm going to be presenting today is entitled Plastiglomerate, New Materialisms in the Anthropocene. In 2009, a group of 26 Earth system and environmental scientists at the Stockholm Resilience Center published a paper that was entitled 9 Planetary Boundaries. The findings of this paper were presented to the Club of Rome. The report laid out 9 planetary boundaries which revealed the tipping thresholds that humans must not cross if they wish to avert irreversible climate change. The 9 planetary boundaries are notable for their spatial scale, which, as the name suggests, is global in reach. And of course, the report implies that the fate of humans is interwoven on a planetary scale. Moreover, it also lays out how interdependent, incredibly variegated regions and zones of the Earth are. The 9 planetary boundaries consist of the following: climate change, biogeochemical flows, which includes nitrogen and phosphorus, biodiversity, land use, atmospheric aerosols, chemical pollution, freshwater use, ocean acidification, and stratospheric ozone depletion. On January 15, 2005, a team of 18 researchers published findings in Science magazine that argue that the first of these 4 planetary boundaries, climate change, biodiversity, biogeochemical flows, and land use or change, have already been crossed. Building on earlier systems theory, be it the Club of Rome's 1972 Limits of Growth study, or Donella Meadows' Thinking in Systems, or the World Systems theory of Emanuel Wallerstein, the planetary boundaries model suggests the massive scale for addressing climate change. In 2014, Elizabeth Kolbert, in her award-winning book, The Sixth Extinction: An Unnatural History, starkly laid bare the history of previous mass extinctions and the potential extent of the current climate crisis. Again, the scale of the crisis was key to her argument, delineating crises in a range of environments from the atmosphere to water, for a range of beings, from pests to plants, for a span of geographies, global in scale, and with a ripple effect for other Earth systems, as outlined in the aforementioned article putting forward the planetary boundaries. Kolbert's study also discussed previous mass extinctions from prehistoric times to the modern era, thereby underscoring a vast temporal scale. The Holocene, the period preceding our current era, lasted for a staggering 11,700 years, providing planet Earth the relatively stable environment that allowed us to develop to where we are today. It's been proposed to name the current era the Anthropocene, a geologic period marked most by human or anthropo action. The term is widely attributed to freshwater researcher Eugene Sturmer, who started using it in the 1980s, but did not formalize use of it until contacted by Nobel Prize-winning atmospheric scientist and chemist Paul Crutzen. And also to environmental journalist Andrew Revkin, who had used a variant Anthropocene in his 1992 book Global Warming: Understanding the Forecast. In 2008, lead scientist Zalatievitz, in a co-authored report published in GSA Today, asked, Are we now living in the Anthropocene? And he explored the scientific basis for the use of the term. The Planetary Boundaries Report and Kolbert's The Sixth Extinction, as well as numerous other studies, leave no doubt as to the current scale of the environmental crisis, however one wants to define it, spatially or thematically in terms of topic, climate change, ocean acidification, or biodiversity, or temporally. While it's undeniable, the studies also engender another kind of crisis. How does one grapple with a crisis of such a scale or magnitude? That is, how does one address climate change? And of course, Tim Morton's work on hyperobjects here is useful too. In what follows, I want to examine one specific interdisciplinary eco-critical project that grapples with scale and also addresses plastic and offers models for rethinking the relationship between the global and the local. The solution to climate change, I would argue, may not be either or, that is, either global or local in scale, but rather both and. The global interrelatedness is increasingly self-evident. Actions in one place affect another, from loss of biodiversity to ocean acidification to climate change, and as we'll see, plastic. The planetary boundaries model illustrates this interconnectedness or scale related to the Anthropocene. So how does the following interdisciplinary project help us to consider the Anthropocene, to address it, and allow for rethinking of environmental and eco-critical theories and models in theory and practice while focusing on plastic? This article focuses on plastics, a petroleum-derived substance. In the US, petroleum use forms one of the largest motors of climate change through its greenhouse gas emissions, or GHGs, also known as GHGs. After electricity production through burning fossil fuels such as coal and natural gas, petroleum used for transportation is the second largest emitter of GHGs. According to the Environmental Protection Agency, 30% of 2014 greenhouse gas emissions in the US were produced by electricity, and 26% are produced by transportation. And, quote, over 90% of the fuel used for transportation is petroleum-based, end quote. Plastic calls attention to the scale of the petroleum industry, its presence in a range of products, and its movements globally but manifesting locally. As an at times visible and tangible entity, as will be discussed, plastic also remains one of the markers of the petroleum age, as will be discussed further. This project, again, is interdisciplinary. It draws on and it bridges the humanities, the social sciences, and the natural sciences. It thereby also reflects how an interdisciplinary approach can help to address climate change in the Anthropocene. I will discuss how plastic and, quote, imminent dangers plastic poses to marine organisms and their ecosystems, end quote, manifest geologically, which led geologist Patricia Corcoran, aforementioned oceanographer Charles Moore, and artist Kelly Jasvac to suggest naming the modern era the Plastiglomerate. Their research was conducted in the Pacific, but on Camilo Beach on the Big Island of Hawaii. It focuses on the intermingling of plastics and organic debris such as sand, wood, or lava fragments. Their results, they argue, quote, indicate that this anthropogenically influenced material has great potential to form a marker horizon of human pollution, signaling the occurrence of the informal Anthropocene epoch. In 2013, an interdisciplinary team inspired by the findings of oceanographer Charles Moore, who named the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, and this team consisted of him, the geologist Patricia Corcoran, and artist Kelly Jasvac, conducted research into plastic also in the Pacific, but this time on Camilo Beach on the Big Island of Hawaii. As they explored the stones on the beach, they discovered that most of them consisted of a combination of plastics and natural materials, such as sand, wood, coral, and lava rock. This anthropogenically influenced material, they argue, leaves a geological trace of our modern era, the Anthropocene, and it led them to propose a term for it, the Plastiglomerate. The geographic scope of their discovery is vast in scale. It tracks the manifestation of the global use of plastic in a very discrete local location. This is due to the ocean currents that bring it there. Additionally, the temporal scale of their research, taking note as it does of a geological trace that plastic will leave on the historical record, is also immense. Scientific organizations such as the International Commission on Stratigraphy and the International Union of Geological Sciences are using the term plastiglomerate, as Jasvac outlined in an interview, as evidence that we have entered a new geological epoch, the Anthropocene. Corcoran, Moore, and Jasvac's work aims to make visible and bring what is far away, for some, the plastic, nearby. The stones they discovered were often buried either in sand or intermingled with nearby vegetation and underbrush. Plastiglomerate identifies plastic that has been caught by being intermingled with natural material and thus might well not break down and instead be preserved. Temporally, they document plastic as it might document our present era for the geologic record. Time-wise, it's a discovery so vast in scale that it's difficult to fathom. Moore had first discovered this amalgamation of plastic and rock when he visited Camilo Beach on the Big Island of Hawaii in 2006. Since an earlier 1997 trip and his discovery of the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, he's organized over 15 ocean trips and he's personally been on 10 voyages between Hawaii and California, gathering plastics along the way as he sailed and documenting the changes in quantity and in contents. His 1998 trip and his 1999 study revealed that plastic outnumbered plankton by 6 to 1. His 2000 and 2003 study revealed that plastic outweighed zooplankton by a factor of 5 to 2. Since 2005, the Agalita, which is a nonprofit organization that he co-founded devoted to the study of plastics in the oceans, and solving this pollution crisis, publishes annual reports that analyzes the plastics they gathered from the ocean. Agalita will soon publish a 15-year retrospective study that will outline long-term trends since Moore's discovery of the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. He carries out these investigations in the Pacific Ocean on the shore of his home state, California, and also on the shore of the starting point of these ocean trips in Hawaii. In 2012, Patricia Corcoran brought Moore to Western University in Ontario to give a guest lecture about plastic pollution. On one of his slides, Moore featured a stone he had found on Kamilo Beach in Hawaii without having developed a name for it. The stones piqued the curiosity of Corcoran, who is mentioned as a geologist. She was keen to investigate the site and the stones more. Jasvek, who is an artist who also teaches at Western University in Ontario, attended the talk and had previously worked with plastic material vinyl. She sought Corcoran out after the talk and expressed interest in collaborating if Corcoran pursued the topic of oceans and plastics further. In 2013, Corcoran and Jasvek headed to Hawaii on a research trip and sampled 21 sites on Kamilo Beach, which is about 2,300 feet long. They gathered rocks that were both on the surface of the beach and buried in the sand or nearby vegetation. What brings the plastic to the southern tip of Hawaii Island or the Midway Atoll, which people might be a little bit more familiar with, which is where Chris Jordan took his photographs of the effect of plastics on the birds that are there. What brings the plastic to this area of Hawaii is the great oceanic current called the gyre. Globally, there are 5 major oceanic gyres, which include the North Pacific Gyre and the South Pacific Gyre. The North Pacific Gyre moves in a clockwise direction from the shores just east of Asia, across the Pacific, heads east, turns south far off the shores of North America, and then it gradually circles back west again towards Asia. The path of the North Pacific gyre thus encircles a broad stretch of ocean from the Midway Atoll in the northeast to the south tip of Hawaii Island. The plastics that wash up on Kamilo Beach through this gyre melded together with natural materials found on the shore, such as sand, lava rock, and wood. The dense matter that results makes the rock heavier and thus less likely to be transported onward by wind or water, and also more likely to be buried and thus preserved. What makes plastiglomerate a marker of the Anthropocene is that plastic is an anthropogenically derived material and that, quote, the fragments were formed anthropogenically, end quote. I'm quoting from their writings about this material. And that it is, quote, burned, created by burning plastic debris in an open environment, end quote. In their research, the plastiglomerate was found quote, buried by sand and organic debris, as well as having been trapped by vegetation, which demonstrates the potential for preservation in the future rock record, end quote. In their study, Corcoran, Moore, and Jasvik also cite the possibility of finding, quote, similar deposits where lava flows, forest fires, and extreme temperatures occur, end quote. To the wide geographic scale, which is the Pacific Ocean, its northern Pacific Gyre, and its plastic garbage, and which informs both Jordan's project and also their own, the study published by Corcoran, Moore, and Jasvik adds a very long temporal marker, given that they present the plastiglomerate as the first stone to mark the Anthropocene in geological terms. Given the scale of plastic in the Pacific, how can one address the issue? It is undoubtedly a global issue. As Moore points out in an editorial he published in 2014 after returning from his 10th and most recent trip to the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, quote, No scientist, environmentalist, entrepreneur, national or international government agency has yet been able to establish a comprehensive way of recycling the plastic trash that covers our land and inevitably blows and washes down to the sea, end quote. And he continues, the effects of plastic in terms of pollution to the environment, to marine wildlife, and to humans are only beginning to become known. While environmental groups organize beach cleanups, they, quote, will never be able, he argues, to clean up remote garbage gyres, end quote. The only solution, he concludes, is to prevent plastic, quote, from getting into the ocean in the first place, end quote. In other words, the solution, like the problem, must be global. And the solution must be focused on prevention at the source. Moore's solution shares the environmental justice movement's ethos of leave it in the ground. With regard to fossil fuels, that is, prevention at the source and reducing the use might be the best solution. To date, no nationwide ban on plastic bag exists in the US or in Canada. Within the United States, California has a statewide ban on plastic bags that went into effect July 1, 2015. In Hawaii, all counties have a ban on plastic bags. And while it's not a state-level legislated ban, it is a de facto statewide ban, which also went into effect on July 1, 2015. The ban in Hawaii was first phased in on the island of Kauai and on the island of Maui in 2011 and on Big Island in 2013. Connecticut is currently looking to phase out the sale of bags by October 2017. 20 U.S. states are considering plastic bag bans, and the U.S. territories of American Samoa and Puerto Rico have also banned plastic bags. Oddly, it's often forgotten that plastic bags are typically derived from petroleum. One could thus also consider whether the ever-increasing contortions the oil industry undertakes, evidenced by the places where it is digging for oil or the wars being waged for oil, are best expended on disposable plastic bags. Should there not be a value associated with the cost, that is, the true availability, or in this case, scarcity of a resource? Of course, such a question vis-a-vis oil would raise questions for a whole range of petroleum-related products and industries, from plastics to products consumed relying on air shipping. It would raise questions about the extent to which industrialized countries, in particular the US, have built national economies on companies that make these products. It would invite scrutiny into how and why federal agencies responsible for effective government regulation, effective environmental regulation, have been defanged, co-opted, and gutted. Additionally, even when plastic bags are quote-unquote biodegradable, Moore reminds us that that does not mean that they biodegrade in the ocean the same way that they would elsewhere. A systems approach would flag a model or a system fixated on growth, in this instance on more plastic bags without regard for their life cycle, that is, both from where they are, from what they are derived or where they end up, is part of the issue. It would also flag assessing the costs associated with growth. It would bear in mind the cost of producing plastic and the cost associated with disposing of it, both proper and improper disposable that needs to be cleaned up. It would bear in mind the environmental and health impacts. It would factor in both these costs. Another system of thought might suggest returning these costs to the source, that is, to the producers of plastic bags, or to the consumers of them, and not having both costs outsourced onto the state. Doing either would lead to a quick shift in the market, as it were, of plastic bag production and use. Paying for a plastic bag is a method commonly used to curb plastic bag use, but it does not, of course, even begin to address the environmental and health costs associated with them. We could leave the global issue with local impacts of plastics in the Pacific here, fixating on these practical solutions. Again, larger scale nationwide, smaller scale statewide or municipal bans on the one hand, and on the theoretical shift, which would bear in mind the cost of plastics and aim to initiate a system thinking and a systemic shift. But let me add just one more closing thought here. To return to scale, the issue of plastic in the Pacific and the discussed project related to it, the concept of plastiglomerate put forward by Corcoran, Moore, and Jasvik, raise fundamental questions on a spatial and a temporal scale. The solutions to them are equally as vast in scope. Spatially, are they local or global, or both? And economically, are they at the site of production or at the site of consumption? They also open up onto larger questions of historical inequities and their legacies and/or present-day inequities. That is, if plastiglomerate is a marker of the Anthropocene and one seeks to find a problem, be it to the plastic locally or global, or to the petrochemical or petroleum industry writ large, or to climate change, might one not also want to trouble the very concept of Anthropocene, as some have done, to propose a solution, whether it has a name or not, that seeks to think climate change as an opportunity to radically rethink power structures, historically and presently, and seeks to redress them by radically restructuring, ensuring climate justice, economic justice, and racial justice, thereby favorably retipping the scale. Thanks so much for your time. I look forward to the other papers and your comments.